Say it again, Theo whispered, his hand still resting on my jaw like he wasn't sure I was real. Say you didn't mean to kiss me. I couldn't. Because I had meant it. Every second of it. 3 weeks earlier, I hadn't even known his name. My name is Callum Reyes, and I never expected the worst month of my life to start with a doorbell. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when my boyfriend, Adrian, called to tell me his brother needed a place to crash for a few weeks, maybe a month tops. Adrian and I had been together for a year and a half, comfortable in the easy rhythm of shared groceries and lazy Sunday mornings. Adding a third person to our apartment, even temporarily, felt like static on a clean signal. He just got out of a bad situation, Adrian said, voice careful in that way he used when he already knew I'd say yes before I did. New city, new job. He doesn't know anyone here but us. I said yes, of course. Adrian's brother was family, and family gets the spare room without a second thought. I did not expect Theo. He showed up with 2 duffel bags and a guitar case, rain flattening his dark hair against his forehead, and when he looked up at me from the doorstep and said, "You must be Cal. Adrian talks about you like you hung the moon," something in my chest did a strange, unfamiliar flip. I told myself it was nothing. New people made rooms feel different. That was all. I was wrong, and some small, honest part of me already knew it. The first 2 weeks were easy in the way strangers are easy, polite, careful, full of small kindnesses that cost nothing. Theo made coffee for all 3 of us every morning without being asked. He laughed at Adrian's terrible jokes with real warmth, the kind that made you like him instantly, and he was quiet in a way that filled a room rather than emptied it. I noticed things I had no business noticing. The way he tapped his fingers against his knee when he was thinking. The low hum he did under his breath while doing dishes, some song I never recognized. The particular quiet he fell into after Adrian left for his night shifts, when it was just the 2 of us and the apartment felt smaller, warmer, more dangerous somehow. "You always this quiet when he's gone?" Theo asked one night, setting a mug of tea in front of me without being asked. He remembered I like mine too hot to drink right away. "Guess I don't have much to say when it's just me," I said. "You've got plenty to say," he said, settling into the chair across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched under the small table. "I don't think you're quiet. I think you're careful." Nobody had ever described me that precisely before. I felt seen in a way that unsettled me more than it should have, and I blamed the tea for the heat crawling up my neck. That was the night the static started, the low hum of something neither of us named, running underneath every ordinary conversation, every accidental brush of hands reaching for the same dish towel, every laugh that lasted a half-second too long while we held eye contact we shouldn't have held. By the 3rd week, I had started noticing the smaller version of myself that existed only in the hour between Adrian leaving for work and Theo and I settling into whatever this had quietly become. I noticed how I chose my shirts more carefully on the nights I knew it'd be just us. I noticed how I laughed louder at his jokes than they deserved. I noticed, and I hated myself a little for noticing, how disappointed I felt on the rare nights Theo made other plans. We built a routine without discussing it, movies with the volume too low so we ended up leaning close to hear the dialogue, late walks around the block for air that stretched into an hour, conversations that started about nothing and ended somewhere raw and honest, the kind of honesty you only offer people you trust completely or people you're falling for. "Can I tell you something?" Theo asked one night, on one of those walks, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. Eyes fixed somewhere past the streetlights. "Always. I wasn't running from a bad job." He exhaled, and it fogged in the cold air between us. "I was running from a relationship that ended because I couldn't be honest about who I was. Not to him, not really to myself either. So when Adrian said I could stay here, it felt like, I don't know, a reset. a place to figure out how to just be myself without flinching. I stopped walking. You're not flinching now. He looked at me then, really looked, in that way that made my heartbeat climb into my throat. No, he said quietly. Not around you. We stood there a beat too long, close enough that I could see the streetlight reflected in his eyes, close enough that leaning in would have taken no effort at all. My whole body wanted to. Something in his did too. I could feel it in the way he didn't step back. Then a car horn blared somewhere down the street, and the moment shattered like glass, and we both laughed too quickly and kept walking like nothing had almost happened. But something had. We both knew it. Neither of us said it. Guilt is a strange, patient thing. It doesn't announce itself loudly at first. It just sits quietly at the edge of every good moment, waiting. I loved Adrian. That was never the question. He was steady and kind, and had loved me through some of my worst years without ever making me feel like a burden. But loving someone, and feeling your whole chest tighten every time his brother walked into a room were, I was learning, two entirely different kinds of gravity. I tried to create distance. I stayed later at work. I left the room when Theo entered it, made excuses about calls I needed to take, about being tired. He noticed, of course he noticed everything about me, and one evening, when Adrian was asleep on the couch after a long shift, Theo found me in the kitchen and asked the question I'd been dreading. Did I do something? No, I said too fast. Cal. His voice was soft, but there was something underneath it, hurt, maybe, or fear that he already knew the answer. You've been avoiding me for a week. I'm not stupid. I know what this is. My hands went still on the counter. What is it then? Say it. He stepped closer, and every rational part of my brain screamed at me to step back, to put the width of the kitchen between us, to remember the man sleeping 15 feet away who loved me. I didn't move. It's the same thing I've been feeling since the night you handed me a spare key and told me the lock sticks if you don't jiggle it just right, Theo said, voice barely above a whisper. It's the thing I think about when I should be thinking about literally anything else. And I hate it, because it's not supposed to exist. You're his. You're my brother's. I know, I said, and my voice cracked on the second word. Then why does it feel like you're not? Neither of us answered that. We just stood there, a foot apart, breath uneven, the whole weight of weeks of almost pressing down on both of us, until I finally forced myself to walk away, because staying felt like a decision I wasn't ready to make. I told myself distance would fix it. Distance usually does. I started picking up extra shifts. I stopped joining movie nights. I let Adrian believe I was just stressed about work, and he, trusting and unsuspecting, took me at my word and tried to help in every way he knew how, cooking my favorite meals, rubbing my shoulders, telling me to relax. Every kindness he offered felt like a small blade, because I knew what I was hiding from him, even if I hadn't done anything to hide yet. Theo pulled back too. We went from easy laughter to careful, clipped politeness, the kind that hurts worse than silence because it's a performance of normalcy neither of us believed. I told myself it was for the best. I told myself feelings fade if you starve them long enough. I was wrong about that too. 3 weeks of distance came to a head on a Friday night, when Adrian left for a work trip, 3 days away, and the apartment fell into the kind of quiet that has weight to it. Theo and I orbited each other carefully, both aware of the empty third space in the apartment, both aware of what that emptiness meant. Around midnight, unable to sleep, I found him on the balcony, guitar across his lap, not playing, just holding it like an anchor. Can't sleep either? I asked. He looked up, and in the dim light from the kitchen, I could see how tired he looked, not physically, but in some deeper, more exhausting way. Haven't slept right in weeks, if I'm honest. I sat down beside him, closer than distance would have dictated, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. Me neither. Cal, I think we need to talk about it. Actually talk. Not dance around it. My heart was a drum against my ribs. Okay. I've thought about leaving, he said quietly. Finding my own place sooner than planned. Not because I don't want to be here, because I want to be here too much. And it's not fair to Adrian. And it's not fair to you. And honestly, it's not fair to me either, loving someone I can't have. The word loving hit the air between us, and neither of us pulled it back. Say that again, I said, voice barely audible. Which part? The part where you said loving. Theo set the guitar aside carefully, like it might break something if he moved too fast. I love you, Cal. I've been trying not to for a month, and it's the worst fight I've ever lost. I should have stood up. I should have said something about Adrian, about loyalty, about the version of myself that believed in doing the right thing even when it cost him everything he wanted. Instead, I found myself closer to Theo than I had ever let myself get, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off him in the cold night air, close enough that his breath caught audibly when I didn't pull away. We can't, I whispered, even as I leaned in. I know, he whispered back, leaning in too. Our foreheads touched first. A small, terrifying intimacy, softer than a kiss, but somehow more honest. His hand found mine on the cold balcony floor, fingers lacing together like they'd been practicing the movement for weeks in some private, imagined future. Cal. A phone buzzed. Adrian's ringtone, from inside, forgotten on the kitchen counter. We broke apart like the sound had physically pushed us, both breathing hard, both staring at each other with the particular horror of two people who had almost done something irreversible. I should go to bed, I said, standing too fast, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and shame and something that felt disturbingly like relief that we'd been interrupted before either of us had to choose. Cal, wait. Good night, Theo. I didn't sleep that night. I doubt he did either. Adrian came home 2 days later, tanned from a work conference in a warmer city, full of stories and easy affection, kissing my forehead in the kitchen while I flinched internally at how normal he made it all seem. I hated myself more in that moment than I ever had in my life. Theo kept his distance, polite and careful, the picture of a good houseguest, and if Adrian noticed the strange, brutal quiet between his brother and his boyfriend, he chalked it up to some minor tension he didn't need to worry about. He had no idea. That ignorance felt like its own kind of cruelty, one I was inflicting on him without meaning to. It was Adrian, ironically, who broke the tension, by announcing at dinner one night, cheerfully, that he'd been offered a 6-month project overseas, a career opportunity too good to refuse, starting in 3 weeks. You'd come with me eventually, he said to me, taking my hand across the table. Once you can transfer with work. It'd just be a few months apart at first. I said yes. Of course I said yes. What else was there to say, sitting at a table with the man I'd built a life with, and the man I couldn't stop thinking about, both watching me for a reaction I didn't know how to give honestly. Later that night, after Adrian fell asleep early, exhausted from planning, I found Theo in the kitchen again, staring at nothing, a glass of water untouched in front of him. Congratulations, he said flatly, when he saw me. Yes, that solves everything. He leaves, I leave, we all go back to pretending none of this happened. Theo. No, it's fine. His voice cracked on fine, betraying exactly how not fine it was. It's the right thing. You love him. You should go with him eventually. I should find my own place before then. Everyone does the responsible thing, and this whole mess just disappears. Do you want it to disappear? I asked, and the question surprised even me with how much it mattered. He looked at me for a long moment, jaw tight, eyes glassy in the kitchen light. No, he admitted. God help me, I don't. The night before Adrian's departure, the apartment buzzed with barely contained tension, suitcases by the door, a farewell dinner Theo had insisted on cooking, laughter that felt thinner than it used to. I watched Adrian move through our home with the easy confidence of a man who trusted his life completely, and the guilt sat in my stomach like a stone I couldn't swallow past. After dinner, Adrian excused himself early to finish packing, kissing me goodnight with a warmth that made my chest ache with shame. Theo and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, television playing something neither of us watched, silence stretching taut between us. "I need to tell you something," I finally said, muting the TV. "And I need you to actually hear it, not just the parts that are easy." Theo turned toward me slowly, bracing himself. "Okay. I love Adrian." "I do." "That's not a lie, and it never was." I took a breath, steadying myself against what came next. "But what I feel for you isn't nothing, and I can't keep pretending it is just because it's inconvenient, or because it hurts him, or because I'm scared of what it means about me." "Cal, let me finish." My hands were shaking. "I don't know what the right thing is here. I don't have some clean answer. All I know is that every time you're in a room, some part of me lights up that I didn't know was dark before you got here, and I can't keep lying to both of us about that." The silence that followed felt endless. Then Theo reached over, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and cupped my jaw in his hand the way he had in the hook of this very story, the moment I'd remember for the rest of my life, no matter what happened after. "Say it again," he whispered. "Say you didn't mean to kiss me." And this time, when he leaned in, I didn't pull back. Our lips met, soft, hesitant, both of us shaking with the weight of everything we'd been holding back for a month, and for one suspended, terrifying, beautiful moment, nothing else in the world existed except the two of us and the truth we could no longer outrun. We broke apart, breathless, foreheads pressed together. "What happens now?" Theo whispered. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I won't pretend the days that followed were simple. They weren't. I sat Adrian down before he left, not with every detail, but with enough truth to be fair to him, to give him the respect of an honest ending rather than a slow, cowardly unraveling from another continent. It was the hardest conversation of my life, and it cost me a friendship I'm not sure will ever fully heal, and a version of myself that believed love was simple if you just tried hard enough. Adrian was hurt, and angry, and eventually, months later, something closer to understanding, though understanding never erases pain entirely. He left for his project anyway, needing the distance more than ever, and Theo moved out within the week, unwilling to build anything on the wreckage of his brother's trust. We didn't rush into anything. That felt important to both of us. We spent months rebuilding as friends first, letting the dust settle, letting Adrian's anger have room to exist without us making it worse. It wasn't until almost a year later, on a quiet evening not unlike the one on that balcony, that Theo took my hand again and asked if I was ready to try, really try, at something honest, something built without anyone's back turned to it. "I'm ready," I told him. "I've been ready. I was just scared of what it would cost." "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Everything it cost?" I thought about Adrian's face the night I told him the truth, about the year of careful, patient rebuilding, about every quiet, aching month of distance Theo and I put between wanting each other and finally, truly choosing each other the right way. "Yes," I said, and meant it completely. "Because this time, there's nothing to hide from." He kissed me then, slow and certain, no guilt shadowing the edges of it, no clock ticking toward an ending. Just two people who had finally stopped running from the truth of what they were to each other. If you felt every ounce of that tension, that guilt, that impossible pull between loyalty and truth, you're not alone. Stories like Cal and Theo's remind us that love rarely arrives at a convenient time, and the bravest thing we can do is face it honestly, whatever it costs. "You have no right to be happy," Adrian said, his voice flat over a bad international connection. Not yet. Not this fast. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not asking your permission. No, he said quietly. I guess you're not. Not anymore. That was the first time my former partner and I had spoken in 4 months. It would not be the last hard conversation of the year that followed, but it was the one that taught me healing doesn't ask permission either. It just happens slowly, whether you're ready or not. Adrian's project overseas was supposed to last 6 months. He stayed almost a full year, and I never asked why, because I already knew. Distance was easier than forgiveness, and forgiveness, if it ever came, needed time neither of us could rush. I threw myself into work in his absence, into the ordinary business of rebuilding a life that had quietly cracked down the middle. Theo and I kept our promise to each other. No rushing, no pretending the wreckage around us didn't exist. We saw each other twice a week, sometimes just coffee, sometimes long walks that ended in nothing more than a hand briefly held and released. It felt strange, courting someone I already loved, learning him slowly instead of falling all at once. This is the part nobody tells you about, Theo said one evening, on a park bench that had become unofficially ours. That doing the right thing still feels like grief, even when it's also relief. You grieving something? I asked. My brother's trust, he said simply. I don't think that comes back quick, if it comes back at all. I didn't have anything comforting to offer, because he wasn't wrong. Some doors, once you walk through them, don't close the same way behind you. I learned later, much later, from Adrian himself, that he wrote me letters that year. Dozens of them. Angry ones in the first weeks, full of words he was glad he never sent. Then confused ones, then quiet ones, then, by month 8, letters that weren't really about me and Theo anymore, but about himself, about a relationship he'd built on being needed rather than being known, about a version of love that asked so little of him that he never had to examine whether it was actually right. He told me this on a video call in month 9, his face tired and older somehow, lit blue by some unfamiliar apartment halfway across the world. I keep waiting to hate you, he admitted. I thought I did for a while. But mostly I just miss having someone who knew my coffee order and didn't need to be told. I don't know if that's love or habit. I've had a lot of time to think about the difference. Adrian. I'm not calling for an apology, he said, cutting me off gently. I got that already, back when you told me the truth instead of letting me find out some worse way. I'm calling because I think I owe you one too. I wasn't blind because I trusted you. I was blind because it was easier than asking myself hard questions about what I actually wanted from you versus what I wanted you to be for me. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, not yet. But it was the first brick in a bridge neither of us thought we'd ever want to build again. If the first month with Theo had been static and almost touches, the year that followed was something slower and steadier. The difference between a spark and a flame that actually holds. I learned things about him I'd never had the patience or the permission to learn before. That he wrote music he never showed anyone, private and unfinished, stored in a folder labeled simply maybe someday. That he called his mother every Sunday without fail, voice softening into a warmth I rarely heard elsewhere. That underneath his easy, quiet confidence was a man who still flinched sometimes at his own happiness, half convinced it would be taken from him the moment he trusted it fully. You do that thing, I told him one night, where you brace for the worst right when things are good. Like you're daring the universe to prove you wrong for feeling okay. He was quiet for a long moment. The ex I told you about, the one before I moved in, he did that to me. Made me feel like wanting things openly was dangerous. Like the safest way to love someone was in secret, where it couldn't be used against me. I'm not him, I said. I know. He reached for my hand, and this time there was no ocean of guilt underneath it, no third person's trust hanging over the gesture. I'm working on believing it, though. Give me time. I gave him all the time he needed. It turned out to be the easiest patience I'd ever practiced, because unlike the year before, we finally had nothing to hide it from. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, 6 months after that balcony. No rain, no crisis, no ticking clock counting down to someone walking through the door. Just Theo, cooking dinner in a kitchen that was now fully his own, humming that same unnamed song under his breath while I set the table. "You're staring," he said, without turning around. "I'm allowed to now." He turned, wooden spoon still in hand, a small, disbelieving smile tugging at his mouth. "Are we doing this? For real? No more careful, no more waiting for the right moment." "I think the right moment already came and went," I said, crossing the kitchen toward him. "I think we're just catching up to it." He set the spoon down. I closed the distance between us. No hesitation this time. No fear of a phone ringing or a brother walking in. No guilt shadowing the edges of it. When our lips met, it was soft and sure and entirely ours, built on a year of patience instead of a month of secrecy, and it tasted, absurdly, like garlic and the particular relief of finally arriving somewhere we'd been walking toward for a long time. "So," he said, breathless, forehead against mine. "Boyfriend?" "Boyfriend," I confirmed, and the word felt lighter than I ever imagined it could, given everything it cost to get there. Adrian's flight landed on a gray Sunday morning 14 months after he'd left. I wasn't at the airport. That wasn't my place anymore, and we both knew it, but Theo went, alone, to pick up his brother, the first time they'd stood in the same room since everything broke apart. He told me about it that night, quiet and a little raw. He hugged me first. Before he said anything, before any of the hard stuff. Just hugged me like he'd miss me more than he was angry. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," Theo admitted. "And guilty for being relieved, which I guess is just what this whole thing is going to feel like for a while." Progress and guilt, tangled up together. Adrian didn't reach out to me for another month after that, his choice, and a reasonable one. When he finally did, it was a simple text, "Coffee?" Just to talk. No agenda. We met at a small cafe neither of us had history with, careful neutral ground. He looked well, tanned, a little leaner, something settled in his face that hadn't been there before he left. "I'm not going to pretend it doesn't still sting," he said, stirring his coffee he wasn't drinking. "Seeing you both together, even just knowing it. But I've had a year to sit with it, and I think I understand it more than I want to admit." "You don't owe us understanding," I said carefully. "No," he agreed. "But I think I owe myself some peace, and holding on to this forever isn't going to get me there." He looked up, meeting my eyes fully for the first time since he'd sat down. "I loved you. That was real. I don't regret any of it, even the ending. I just needed time to stop being angry that the ending happened the way it did." "For what it's worth," I said, "I'm sorry. Not for loving him. For the way I let you find out slower than you deserved, even if it wasn't as slow as it could have been." Adrian nodded, something loosening in his shoulders. "Yeah. That part, I can forgive. The rest just needed time, not an apology. Healing a family, even one built by circumstance rather than blood, doesn't happen in a single conversation over lukewarm coffee. It happened slowly, over the following year. An invitation to Theo's birthday dinner that Adrian almost didn't come to, and did. A holiday where all three of us sat at the same table for the first time, tense but civil, then, unexpectedly, laughing at some old memory that predated all of this and belonged to none of the wreckage. By the second anniversary of Theo moving into that spare room, something unrecognizable from those early months of guilt and static had grown in its place. Not the family we'd have chosen if you'd asked any of us 2 years earlier, but a real one nonetheless, held together by the particular kind of forgiveness that only survives if everyone involved decides, again and again, to choose it. "Never thought I'd be here," Adrian admitted one night, watching Theo and me from across a table at his own housewarming party. A new apartment, a new start he'd built for himself. "Watching you two be happy, and actually meaning it when I say I'm glad." "You don't have to be glad," I told him. "You're allowed to just be okay with it." "I know." He smiled, small but genuine. "But I am glad. Turns out I like both of you too much to hold onto something that would have made all of us miserable forever. Funny how that works out." Theo proposed on the same balcony where everything had started, the same cold night air, the same guitar he still hadn't finished the song on, though he played me the first verse that night before he got down on one knee, voice shaking through the words he'd clearly rehearsed and forgotten anyway. "I've loved you since the night you handed me tea I couldn't drink because it was too hot," he said. "I've loved you through the worst version of loving you, the guilty, secret, complicated version, and I want the chance to love you through the easy version too. The one where nobody has to hide, and nobody gets hurt, and it's just us, choosing each other on purpose, every single day." I said yes before he even finished the question, which made him laugh through the tears neither of us bothered hiding. Adrian came to the wedding. He stood near the back, and when Theo caught his eye during the vows, his brother gave him a small, steady nod. Not perfect closure, not a fairy tale ending for everyone involved, but something honest and hard one. Three people who had broken each other's trust and slowly, imperfectly, built something worth keeping in its place. At the reception, Adrian found me by the drinks table, glass raised. "To doing the right thing eventually," he said. "Even when it takes the long way around." "To the long way around," I agreed, and we clinked glasses, and for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel like there was anything left to apologize for. Some love stories don't start clean, and this one certainly didn't. It started with guilt, and static, and a truth none of us were ready to face. But maybe that's the real lesson here, that the right ending isn't always the one that costs nothing. Sometimes it's the one you have to earn, slowly, honestly, one hard conversation at a time.